Well, now joining us is Viktor Yahun, military and public figure, Major General retired of the Security Service of Ukraine, Deputy Head of the Security Service of Ukraine in 2014 to 2015, and also Director of the Security Sector Reform Agency. Good evening and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. Good evening.
Well, since we're talking about modern warfare and modern military technologies, so here, probably when we talk about some kind of superiority, it's not so much about quantity as it is about quality. Or maybe I'm wrong. Let's clarify the words of the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine about the pace of production and the production of Ukrainian weaponry.
A topic that until recently seemed like a matter of the distant future is gradually really becoming a reality of war. And the statement by the president, the statements by the ministers of defense and European partners are evidence that Ukraine's transition from a model of an aid recipient to a model of one of the key producers of modern weaponry and a supplier of security technologies for Europe. The main focus is really on accelerating the development and serial production of Ukrainian ballistic missiles. Just a few years ago, such projects were discussed mainly among experts. But today, the leadership of the armed forces openly talks about scaling up production as one of the priorities of defense policy. It's no longer just about drones, but also about creating our own long-range, high-precision weapons capable of changing the balance of power on the battlefield. No less telling is Zelensky's statement that Ukraine is capable of surpassing Russia in certain areas, equipped with advanced technologies. This is not a political slogan, but a reflection of an objective trend in recent years. It is the war in Ukraine that has become the world's largest laboratory, a laboratory for modern military technologies, especially in the fields of unmanned systems, digital battle management, electronic warfare, and the rapid implementation of engineering solutions. The pace of innovation in Ukraine's defense sector today is indeed significantly higher than in Russia's cumbersome military industrial system. Initiatives like Drone-Dale are especially important. According to Ukraine's Minister of Defense, more than 20 countries have expressed their willingness to join in co-financing the production of Ukrainian drones. Essentially, a new model of international military-industrial cooperation is taking shape, where Ukraine is becoming not only a consumer of weaponry, but also a developer and a production hub for its allies. It should be explained that there are issues that can only be resolved on the battlefield. For example, Ukraine could not afford missiles with a range of over 500 kilometers, even in peacetime. Why is that? Why, because we simply don't have testing ranges that could provide such a long flight distance safely for our population. We're not going to launch a missile from Uzhhorod to Donetsk that flies over our own territory, and it could, God forbid, fall somewhere. But now we can calmly strike across enemy territory, even up to 7,000 kilometers. I don't think anyone over there will object to us operating there. It's the same system with other weapons that are being transferred to us. So during combat, during its use, the specifications can be changed, improved, and then presented on the arms market as something that has undergone combat testing. At the same time, for example, we are actively developing cooperation with Germany in the field of air and missile defense. There are joint projects to protect against Russian ballistic missiles, as well as waiting for a decision from the U.S. regarding the localization of certain elements of the system's production, Patriot on the territory of Ukraine. All of this points to the gradual integration of the Ukrainian industrial complex, the military industrial complex, into the European and transatlantic defense architecture. That is why there are more and more statements about Ukraine's new role in NATO's security system. Formally, the country is not yet a member of the alliance. However, in reality, it is the Ukrainian army today that has the largest experience in Europe of conducting modern, high-intensity warfare against an army that, until recently, was considered the second most powerful in the world. This experience, along with technology and production capabilities, is becoming a strategic resource for the entire European community. That is why, in fact, it's not just about helping Ukraine. It's about the fact that Europe's security will increasingly be built with the direct involvement of the Ukrainian defense industry, Ukrainian technologies, and Ukrainian combat experience. This is exactly what is becoming the main message in the current statements of the Ukrainian leadership, and those directions that are capable of shaping the architecture of European security probably for many years to come.
By the way, Viktor Nikolaevich, this all raises the question of how Ukraine's place in the global defense industry has changed and is changing.
Well, look, it's not like we came there with nothing at all. Our defense industry was strong. It's just that no one paid any attention to it, or it was simply ignored. Its very existence. And it was used not for its existence. I mean, well, everyone remembers Yuzmash and our Antonov and the developments that were made at the armored vehicle factories. These were very powerful. They were enterprises, entire sectors. Not to mention the repair facilities. Ukraine was probably the most powerful republic in the Soviet Union, where the repair facilities were concentrated. Because, according to the Soviet Union's concept, it was Ukraine that was supposed to provide the repair base. And the shipbuilding we had in Mykolaiv, all of that existed, but it was either basically destroyed or simply scattered. And all that needed to be done was to bring it all together, just to direct, to set the right direction of thought. That's what was needed. And basically, money was needed. And when all of that appeared, Ukrainians' creativity started to show itself very powerfully. Look, we're making missiles that are several times cheaper than the ones being supplied to us now. And this is exactly the kind of asymmetry that allows us to stay ahead of the enemy. Because by using fewer resources, we destroy more of their capabilities and their weaponry. This is exactly the focus our companies working on ballistic missiles are taking right now. Because honestly, we probably could have made the ballistics themselves a long time ago. And it would have been powerful because Yushmash rockets have flown into space. But all of that had to be either scaled down to the sizes that were more or less manageable for us. Yeah, it's not some giant rocket that just flies off and lands somewhere out there and carries off 500 tons. Well, not 500, maybe 50 tons of explosives with it. What we needed here were small rockets. All of this had to be worked out, developed in one direction or another. That's why, thank God, there were people who haven't. Our knowledge, our training on our land and with our people not only restored our technologies, but also moved far ahead.
Well, Ukrainian ballistics really deserves a separate discussion about the fact that Ukraine could have used its ballistic missile in combat conditions for the first time. A long range missile to strike legitimate military targets on Russian territory, according to Bloomberg. Journalists drew attention to a fresh report from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. It claims that during the day, air defense allegedly shot down a long-range operational tactical missile, as well as 7 aerial bombs and more than 600 drones. At the same time, Moscow did not specify the type of missile or provide any details about the incident. Let's listen to the direct speech and then continue our discussion.
According to preliminary data, the FP-9 ballistic missile was developed specifically for strikes deep in the Russia, and it has a range of about 850 kilometers. If the information about its combat use is confirmed, this will mark a new stage in the development of Ukraine's domestically produced long-range strike capabilities, which until now have mostly consisted of drones and cruise missiles. From a Bloomberg publication.
Well, while we wait for official confirmation, let's discuss this. If Ukraine really is starting to produce ballistic missiles now, how could this change the balance of deterrence with the Russian Federation?
We need to step away from euphoria because we understand that we're dealing with a completely different mentality. Over there, they can, frankly speaking, sit on the same patch of land, eat, and be happy about it. And still keep moving forward, using, I don't know, whatever's left. But still, there is the idea that when you're not just defeated, but really put in your place, and with your own methods no less, whether they like it or not, they have to think about it. Look, we have access to foreign companies. We have the ability to get, I don't know, engines, some electronic components from other countries, and we can communicate with engineers from other countries. So we're moving forward very quickly, not just because we're so smart and creative, but because we have people who help us, give us advice, or to put it bluntly, help us get rid of our growing pains. And that's why things are really working out for us very quickly and more or less efficiently. If we can build up to 100 missiles a month, and that's exactly the number that can counter any attempts by Russia to destabilize the situation in Ukraine. With this terror that we've been witnessing in recent months, if we can respond in kind, I don't know, roughly speaking, with 100 missiles a month on their territory, of course, we won't target civilian sites, but by destroying their structure and infrastructure, the structure of their military industrial complex. Military targets in the means by which they make money, meaning their export capabilities, I think that would be extremely critical for them. And they would start to wonder whether it's even worth continuing this war, because there would simply be no point anymore. Russia could just cease to exist in an instant. If even that doesn't get through to 'em, well, I just don't understand what could possibly stop these lunatics.
Yes, you put that very accurately and very gently. Viktor Nikolaevich, well, I can't help but ask. Next week, a very important NATO summit is starting. And indeed, it's important because probably for the first time since the Cold War, they'll be discussing new approaches to global security and global defense. To what extent what we're talking about here will also be of interest to those gathered at this summit?
Yes, we have to understand that the summit will be very difficult for us because there are countries that, even if they haven't changed their opinion about Ukraine, are at least adjusting it because of their political changes. Let's not name the countries, but they exist, and they're raising questions about whether we should be helping Ukraine as much as we are. Maybe Ukraine can handle it on its own, or maybe by helping, we're just adding fuel to the fire, as they say. So, all of these are Russian narratives that were literally just voiced by their leader. And you can feel that someone in Europe is listening to them, unfortunately. But I think in the end, the position that will prevail is that this whole war needs to be stopped and stopped specifically on European terms. Not even American terms, but specifically European ones, because America is far away. I think that many people will pay close attention to Ukraine's position, which is not a NATO member, but no one disputes its involvement anymore as one of the eastern frontiers of this alliance.
You know, there's another very important question. After the latest attack on Kyiv, it was reported that 35,000 foreign components were found in the missiles of the Russian Federation in what attacked Ukraine. Right now, we're talking about technology. Let's also say a few words at the end about what the Russian military industrial complex actually looks like today, if they are so dependent on foreign components. How these components end up there is a separate question. Our partners are working on that right now as well.
It's important to understand that they can't modernize old Soviet equipment because you can't just take an old Soviet module and replace it with some kind of electronic gadget that's several times smaller. The situation just doesn't work that way. We saw this with the same Rechnik system, which was developed based on old Soviet systems and technology. That's one thing. Secondly, they don't actually have a steady supply of these parts, and they're forced to do this. Each of their missiles is practically one of a kind. It's a product that's literally assembled right off the conveyor belt. Whether the Russians like it or not, we strike at the enterprises that supply them with electronics and optics, and some components, very important, engines, power supply, fuel. So all of this is very serious. It really affects them. They're forced to use gray schemes through intermediaries, through third and fourth countries to get on these materials, stockpile them somewhere, and try not to stop production, which for them is already running full scale and operates 24/7. Unfortunately, there are countries and people who are willing to cooperate for big money, for triple the price. But that's exactly the incentive that pushes them to do it. I still hope that our partners are working together with us to stop such sanctions violations. I know that there have already been the first court cases, although they didn't really concern not deliveries or any technological items, but still, there are already rulings in Finland, Sweden, and Germany against those who violate the sanctions policy and still try to work around it with Russia. Still, I would like these situations to be dealt with really strictly, to be stopped, prevented, and not allowed to happen. We are constantly in contact with our partners, reaching out directly to companies, showing them their components found in Russian weaponry. We tell them that this is not the kind of publicity their products need, and they understand that. But unfortunately, such cases still occur. I think that the joint efforts of us and our partners will also yield some results.
Yeah, that's also a very important point. And probably also some, let's say, instruments of pressure, which are currently being used as well, to force the Russian Federation towards peace. Viktor Nikolaevich, thank you very much for finding the time to join us. Viktor Yahun, military and public figure, Major General retired of the Security Service of Ukraine,